Most of the time, organizational projects get pushed to the side for projects that have deadlines and pay bills. But I've had enough. This drawer has gotten out of control. I need to do something about it. Using materials left over from previous projects, a few hours time, I came up with something that is functional, it looks good, and it will grow with me over time. The 1/2-inch plywood I'm using for this build is left over from the headboard project I did last month. But honestly, any plywood works here. I started by cutting the plywood down to get my 8 sides that were needed to build the 2 rectangle frames. The 4 sides for the front rectangle are a 1/4 inch smaller than the back to accommodate the edge banding I'll be adding to hide the plywood edge from the front. That'll make more sense here in a minute. After I had those pieces cut, I set up my Craig pocket hole jig for slightly less than a 1/2 inch. This is to take into account the 1/2 inch plywood is actually just under a 1/2 inch. I added 2 pocket holes to the ends of the top and bottom pieces. Then I came back with 1-inch pocket hole screws and wood glue to join everything together. I used a corner clamp to help hold everything square while fastening everything together. A square and a quick clamp would work here too. Just make sure to use something to hold your work pieces in place while screwing them together. When using pocket holes, it's common for your work pieces to want to move. While the glue was drying, I grabbed some leftover walnut from an old project and I made my own edge banding. I cut the strips a 1/4 inch thick using my bandsaw. A cool trick to get the exact size you need is to use a cutoff of the plywood you're using and adjust your fence to it. This 1/4 inch walnut makes up for the 1/4 inch I left off the front panel walls to make the front and back the same size. I attached the edge banding using wood glue and blue tape as a clamp to hold it in place while the wood glue dried. I set the 2 rectangles aside to work on the andybirdbuilds logo on the front of the cabinet. Using a vector image of my logo, I set up the size and toolpaths in my CAD software. I used a 60-degree V-bit here with an advanced V-carve toolpath to cut the logo. I was planning on painting the negative space that the CNC cut, so I applied a masking to keep everything crisp and clean while painting. This particular masking is called Mask 813. I've learned the key when applying this masking is to press it down firmly with a block of wood to make sure it sticks really well. Using a sharp V-bit and the correct feeds and speeds is extremely important as well. After the CNC milled the logo, it was time to paint. I've done a lot of trial and error when it comes to paint bleeding into the edge of the wood and making your letters look bad. So this is what I found works best. The first step is to apply a clear coat. This seals the wood grain and creates a barrier between the wood and paint. Wood is porous and sucks up any moisture, so it's important what it sucks up is clear. Then I hand painted everything using a black acrylic paint. Using spray paint is the typical thought here, but I've learned that the solvents in the spray paint can interact with the clear coat in a way that breaks down the clear coat and destroys the barrier it created. Acrylic paint doesn't have those solvents in it, leaving the clear coat intact and getting a much cleaner result. So after the paint dried, I peeled off the masking and I was really happy with the results. Next, I assembled the front and back panels to the sides using more pocket holes, screws, and wood glue. Then, using a piano hinge, I assembled the front and back together. Next, I turned my attention to the inside of the cabinet. My main goal here was to leave my options open for the cabinet to evolve and grow with me in the future. With that in mind, I knew I wanted a lot of router bit storage, so I grabbed some leftover pine 2x8 I had laying around and ripped down some 2-inch strips that were 14 inches long. Then I measured and marked where I wanted the router bits to land. I marked every inch, so this meant I could fit 13 router bits per 14-inch blank. Leaving enough space between the blocks vertically, I determined that 4 blocks was a good fit with some wiggle room. This means the capacity is 52 router bits. I used my drill press to drill all the holes. I set a stop depth of 1 inch so that all the holes would be the same depth. But if you don't have a drill press, you could use a power drill and mark the depth on your drill bit using some blue tape. You definitely want them to be consistent. I made 3 of the blocks for 1/4 inch bits and 1 for 1/8 inch bits. To attach the router blocks to the cabinet, I used my pin nailer and no glue. This is because I want to be able to change this layout if I need to. If you want it to be more permanent, you can use glue and screws. I highly recommend sanding off the pencil marks before you attach the blocks. I had to put a little extra effort in because I forgot to sand my blocks before I put them in, so definitely do it before. So moving my attention to the other side of the cabinet, I wanted some hooks to hang my collet wrenches, tape measure, double-sided tape, and all the other accessories. But overall, I was less certain of what I wanted here. So again, flexibility was the key here, so I just went with some key hooks that can easily be changed and rearranged as I figure out what works best. One last thing I did before I hung it on the wall was to add magnets to the corners. This is what will hold the cabinet shut. I thought about adding a pull handle to the front, but it looks a lot better without one, and I really didn't need one, so I left it off. To hang it on the wall, I used 2 concrete anchors through the cabinet into the concrete wall. You could use a French cleat here, but I wanted the cabinet to be flush mounted on the wall and not stick out any further than it already does. Now that everything is nice and neat and organized, I don't have to sift through that drawer anymore to find what I need. Everything is right here. When I'm operating the CNC, everything's easy to grab, easy to see. Every time I take the time to complete one of these organizational shop projects, I'm like, why didn't I do this sooner? It feels so good to get organized. So do you have any shop organizational projects that you've been putting off? I would love to hear about them down in the comments below to give me some ideas what I can do next. So what are you looking to do in your shop? Again, if you're interested in building this project, complete plans can be found on craigtool.com. I'll leave a link to these specific plans in the description for you to check out. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.